Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Artist Roundtable. This is a course in the curatorial practice graduate program at the School of Visual Arts. I'm David Ross, and I'm the host of this roundtable every Tuesday from 5 to 7, generally. Although sometimes we change the time if we're talking with someone who's in Europe or in the Far East, or as it happens at the end of the semester, we'll be speaking with someone who's in Iceland. So those times will be different, and you can always find that by checking with the SVA curatorial practice website. Anyhow, today we're really pleased to have with us Sheila Pepe, an artist who I have long admired, and over the last 5 or 6 years or so, has it been that long? We've gotten to work together, and which is something that you can all be envious of me, because working with Sheila is a great pleasure, and of course, hopefully all of you know that for the last several months and on view still till for quite a little bit more time, till the end of January, I think.
December 10th?
To the middle of December, right? There's a wonderful installation taking up Madison Square Park, well, part of Madison Square Park, in a way that, for those of you who have gone to see installations there before, I can't say that anyone has ever made use of the park in the way that Sheila has. Hi, Sheila. Good to see
Hi.
you.
Nice to see you too.
I've decided to have a floral background today because I already miss my garden.
I know
And of course,
all
your
changing.
piece is about a garden.
It's
So
about
I thought I would just, this is my fantasy garden. This is not a real garden, but I'd like to have a garden like this someday. This would be pretty nice.
well, you're
Uh,
in it right now.
yeah, exactly. So I can imagine, maybe by next year, who knows? I'm not sure what you're going to share with us today, Sheila, but it would be great to talk with you about to hear you talk about the Madison Square project, which is probably one of the largest you've ever done, and to know what perhaps they're up to and where your practice is headed. Those are always my favorite two topics to hear from any artist as busy as you are.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I've cobbled together a few things. I'm going to share my screen in a moment, and it's like I can't see. I guess this is the way it is now. I can't see participants. Is
No,
that
not on a webinar. Yeah, I mean, you can
okay?
see a list, but you
Hello,
don't get
people.
access to them. So yeah,
Um, so
they're all wonderful people. I'm absolutely sure.
I'm sure. So in the past years, a lot of my work has occurred, installations have occurred out of town, meaning out of New York. And this is now a very long run of a piece that's very big and at home, here in the city. And so I've gotten a little comfortable thinking, oh, everybody has seen it finally, like everybody's seen this. And then I realized, oh, and then there might be some people out of town who haven't seen it. So I'm gonna
Does it feel good to have a piece in town and
oh my God.
be able to get feedback from friends,
Yeah,
who
you
live
know
right
what
here?
I bought a couple of lawn chairs that I store there so I could have during the even the heat of the summer where it was slightly cooler under the trees. I could have what I called office hours, which is I would go and make a few dates with people so we could sit under the trees and hang out. And it was really fun because it's I would say it's better than sitting in a gallery. It's outside and you can watch people and
Well,
like
it's such a pleasure to be in that program, and the
yeah,
programming of that of at Madison Square Park has been great since day one,
yeah.
and some extraordinary things, and of course I think what you've done there is really at the top of the heap, because you've taken on the park in a very different way than anybody else has, and you've
So
made it yours. It's your garden, right?
my garden, it's my neighbor's garden, but
Right.
I'm in it. I'm happy to be in it. So let me share my screen and start with a few images of that from my website, and then let's see, share screen. Well, there's a bird's eye view of
Yeah.
one of the shots. But some of the shots have been taken on a lift, and it's a kind of the maker's view, because it's what I see when, one of the first things I see when I'm putting it together. And this is just from my website. So where you can go if you want to read more about it. But there's another shot from not from the Farragut lawn, but from these two areas that are, in my mind, a little gateway to the lawn. A lot of times the work is in the park is situated on the Great Lawn, as it was last summer, a few summers. And I'm on the Farragut lawn, which is the most northern here, the most northern lawn, and it's behind there. Uh, Captain, I think it's Captain Admiral, probably Admiral Farragut.
Absolutely, Admiral Farragut. Sure.
Yeah.
And the torpedoes, Farragut.
Full speed ahead. Now, Admiral Farragut is not necessarily my cup of tea, but his sculptor is. That's a St. Gaudens piece, and I became very fond of St. Gaudens, living up in Boston, where he's got some beautiful work. As the sculptures go, as the bronze men go in that park, he's my favorite.
It is another bronze man. It is, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
But
Yeah.
he's got his back to us, and we've got our back to him, or we're inviting him in, but we're a little disinterested in each other. I think, let's see if there's some better shots. Here we go. I think these are mostly shots of putting it up.
Right.
And what I want to say about is mostly about the process, that this is something that I've done inside for I'd say 20 years or more. And there we go. And what there's a feeling like I've been working towards this for my entire life. Like that there's a sense of the process has been played out in so many different ways to go outside, which seemed like the hardest thing to do.
How many people collaborated with you to do all the crocheting?
Well, this is one of the Saturdays in March where people came and they got an honorarium and snacks and all. The park was incredibly supportive, and I had a near daily conversation with Brooke Kamen Rappaport, my curator, who's really devoted to bringing work from people that who've mostly worked inside or who have never made something outside. And that would be me. I've always avoided it completely because I think it's way too nice outside, way too beautiful, too, just too much competition. And
it is a big challenge to have spring happen
yeah,
around your work, right?
and the thought was, yes, I want to do this, and how is it going to happen? And part of me turned into a little bit more of an administrator than I'd ever expected. But there's some drawings of it. But what I think happened was that I started solving new problems. It was very exciting because there were all kinds of new problems to solve that were, mechanical, as well as about weather and how to make sure that it wouldn't blow away or blow things down, or all that engineering I felt was almost, well, it was at the point of us doing this was kind of haptic knowledge. It was just experiential knowledge. I didn't have any tests done on anything, but I knew what it felt like to have things connected and weight distributed, and I knew my materials extremely well, and everything that we planned to do worked incredibly well, including the plants taking over. They're now growing up over, attaching themselves to the crocheting itself and starting to feed out along those lines, which is pretty exciting. you know, I'd long made work that was very ephemeral, and kind of cannibalized for new work, leaving only a handful of installation type pieces, mutable pieces in a few collections, a couple of museum collections, to be reinterpreted by curators. So this idea of proposing a work outside, a public work outside in an environment, in both a cultural environment and physical environment, where uh, longevity of the work had been called into question because of the Bronze Men, and because of social conditions and reasons why people would put up public work, and how one imagines the future with that work, et cetera, that I thought it would be a good time for my position to willingly walk into a sense of extreme, I don't know, what do we call it, friability, that
Mhm.
the work might get destroyed.
Well, you are, it's a three-season piece too. You were pre-spring in terms of the all the plants and flowers there,
Yeah.
then full summer, and now it's going to be fall, and and you could wind up with snow.
I'm hoping, but New York weather hasn't been too snowy in a couple of years, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But this, the other thing was that in all other places, I really had to, in all other places, I could decide on the placement of everything. You know, I put the hardware where I think that it'd be most uh, beneficial for both the construction of the piece and the optical and spatial experience of the work. But in this case, I had some of the most amazing limitations on the North Lawn, on the Farragut Lawn where we were. I could only sink poles, sink the what do you call it? The
The stanchions or the stands.
yeah, they're telephone poles. We could
All
only
right.
sink them where there are no um, roots,
Hmm.
which is one of the most magnificent uh, limitations I've ever had in a art making situation. I
How did they
told,
know?
yeah, how do you know? I learned at the there's a canopy, and even in where there are no leaves, you can see the edge of the canopy, and where the canopy ends, the roots end.
Oh, of course.
So we did this. We placed markers in March so they could check what was underground and that we wouldn't hit anything. But to know that I had to conform to this pre-existing natural condition, even though man-made, still the limitations were about a kind of coexisting with the mission of the park. And that's also how I decided that attachment to the park meant sinking poles that looked like they should be there, and then creating a situation where we would grow things that we might find in some of my neighbor's garden, um, into the work as part and parcel of it, and working with the horticultural crew there, who were fantastic and came up with some great stuff. So that it I had many people ask me, oh, did you do that too? And I was like, yeah, I did that part too. Like I didn't grow the flowers, I didn't sink the poles. I mean, this is a bigger operation than I'm used to, and I pretty much fell in love with it. Many more different kind of workers and workers to engage with, and yeah, it's I think it looks great. It does all the things I wanted to do, and the experience has been incredibly exciting and, in a funny way, liberating, because now I've told the story many times for many years about you know, that my mother taught me how to crochet, and with this, in this case also, that um to finally say, like, I've been happily embraced by the textile world, by the fiber world, but I'm not a fiber artist. I mean, my mother taught me how to crochet the way somebody taught me how to use a chop saw, or, I learned how to fire a kiln, or it's one among many things, but as a marker of the grand invisibility of women's work, and as a marker of craft that is specifically domestic, it was a sign, it was a trope, it is a expression of identity and not of a single person, but of a culture that I believe needs to be elevated and brought into the dialogue. And so this was the public version of that, which is quite exciting. But let me just, I want to show you this chart. Can you read that list for us?
Yeah, sure. Generate, cut apart, differentiate, accumulate, parallel, duplicate, approximately, accumulate, leap, repeat.
So that's kind of how my head works. I mean, that's how I make work. There's so many other uh, lists I could give you, but as all of those are kind of words that describe a process, they could also be a metaphoric for some other mental condition or emotional condition or historical um, imagination or reality. And so this is a kind of map of work before the park. I'm going to have a before Madison Square Park and after Madison. I was like, so BP and AP
Yeah.
work. But all along this, I've had this in my mind, a flattened uh, accumulation of works that in my mind always exist at the same time, because they are all, I don't know, they're all part of my studio, whether they happened in the 90s or they happen now.
Uh-huh.
All
So
being
you reject the idea that your practice is following some kind of linear progression,
yeah,
it's sort of everything exists simultaneously.
yeah. And things get better or different, or I learn things. I learn things that will make things change. But I think of this as a kind of pots of different dishes that are on the stove, and at any point I can add to it, or a menu. I can add another piece to the soups or the salads, or so. This all began with this centerpiece of these doppelgangers, these objects with lights and shadows and wall drawings, and then things literally get taken apart and get fed back and forth. Um, and the practice around the crocheting changes purpose, changes how it gets made or how it gets unmade. And so that generative looping, when I read somebody like Italo Calvino or um, Umberto Eco, I sometimes I think, oh, it's Italian. This kind of this fantastical looping narrative that it was kind of, you can't figure, am I going backwards or forwards, or then I've been listening to the music of Carlo Rotti. Do you know
Hmm.
him?
Yeah, sure.
uh, Fantastic. He's my guy. He's he's the guy who made all of them. I could sing it before I knew who he was, but he's the guy that was Fellini's
Oh, yeah.
composer.
There,
And
there are great albums of all of his soundtracks.
yeah, I've been listening to them. And
Yeah.
so there's something just wonderful and almost fantastical about them that I'm really into. So this is
Oh,
the
I love that
beginning.
image. Yeah, that's great.
And this is always still open as a possibility for working. And now with the new kinds of lights and lamps that we have, what I was nostalgic for some time, of being able to go to Radio Shack and put all these little tiny parts together. Now I can look at the different kind of possibilities of longevity of light and changing color temperature. And so I always dream about like making time. That's always hard, to go back and into this pot and start playing around again. But this is what it looks like in full light, and it's really a bunch of junk. And I would say lovingly, it's a bunch of junk, especially now when issues of craft and uncrafting are a little bit left behind. The de-skilling, the reason why something might be abject or purposefully like physically challenging, or using materials that are question longevity. That seems not to be in the forefront at this moment. And I want to claim that I'm still a part of that conversation on both sides of it. I think it's a grand continuum. So these works really started it all, and I was moved to pull the pictures away from the objects and make the objects their own thing. I still own this little thing, and it still is working for me, and it still stands in now a whole field of what I call votive moderns. And my idea is that I make these tabletop objects that will, by the end of my life, map out every kind of sculpture there ever might be, but in the size of a bedside Madonna, the size of the kind of sculpture that I knew as a child.
Do you do a lot of staring at them? I mean, the way Chinese scholars use those scholars' rocks and to just stare at them.
Well, I stare at them. These things can take now a year to make. I make a lot of parts and I put them away, and then I bring them back, and then I recombine them, and then I paint them, and then I put them back, and I take them apart. And so some of them have taken a couple of years to make, or I'll find a piece from the 90s, a chunk of something that I made in the 90s, and then I'll finish it. So it's one of the very real ways that it's the formalist problem to be solved. That's also about, sculpture is a very recent, our idea of sculpture is very recent. I would say it's only about 150 years old. I would, be a traditionalist and say that it's from Rodin's baptistry doors till now, in this idea of not just depicting the human form, but it's a Rosalind Krauss idea that you would manipulate the process of making in order to say something else, say something with the process of making. So the way he used molds interchangeably and flipped sides, and he made figures, not one of a kind figures for that door. I mean, it was rejected. So there was a manipulation of the process. And then, Picasso's absinthe glasses. And so there was a time, and I love it because it's always when the painters start messing around with sculpture that interesting things happen. So this is another small installation that was installed in a home. And you'll see early use of crocheting, just a little bit, part of the whole, the kind of gestalt. And so these are now all the things that have been taken apart. They don't exist anymore. It's the old thread waxing space.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful place that smelled strange. It smelled like you could still smell the wax.
That was Tim Nye's place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leah's first New York City gig, right?
Yeah.
That's where I met Joanna Fateman. It was very fun.
And so a shadow became important to you by this point now, right? I mean, it
Well, what
started out
happened
with the
was,
drawing, with the
yeah.
drawings, right?
So what I'm doing is I'm still drawing inside of some of the shadows. Let's see, there's an
Hmm.
example. This is the first time I say, okay, I'm just going to make the shadows out of this crocheting. And Josephine is my mother, and she's who taught me how to crochet. And all of these are allegorical stories about us that nobody really understands except for my sister. And I learn a lot about who understands what, and what to what detail. You could expect your audience to know certain things, but that's still that there's this idea that there is still a core idea that gets communicated because we're using architecture in this sense. You don't need to know who's who, but you can understand that there's a relationship of um, many relationships here of the church, masculinity, femininity, the orifice, the wound, the vagina, and then on the other hand, the leaning, towering skyscraper, and then in the upper, this very dark shadow you see of this kind of animal that I've made a special eye, and so you could read
Hmm.
that weird shape as some kind of creature. Um, so, and the exploration of different materials. This was cotton cord, butcher's cord, bakery cord, industrial rubber bands. This also had a smell factor. Actually, it smelled like rubber. Was and the use of color to kind of make what I have done attach to the architecture in a way that is it could feel like an extension of the architecture, not a freestanding drawing apart from the architecture. And
Hmm.
then the crocheting as a kind of strange window treatment, and playing with this, like the grandness of the space and domesticity, and
How about
um
the relationship to the outdoor space there, where
yeah,
because here you had these big windows bringing the trees, or at
yeah,
least the view of the tree, and was this the first time you kind of had to deal with nature in
it's
a
interesting.
direct
It
way?
was the when I don't know if you remember Nina Felsh, and she
Of course, yeah, sure.
wanted me to have them close all the windows down and do the doppelganger thing, do a
Hmm.
big installation of light and shadow. And I said, well, I look at the space, I never alter the architecture in order to do those things. Matter of fact, plugging something in at that point into the wall became an affirmation of the architecture and of the connectivity to this huge power grid, and the idea that when you unplug the work just fell down. The way future work, if you take the hardware out, everything just collapses. Different ideas of contingency are pretty important. Um, so I said, no, I want to do this other work where I'll just make drawings in space. And I knew that at night they left the lights on at night, and so this would create a different. You'd be able to see in and see these um, kind of positive, negative shape drawings the way it worked at nighttime, and during the day they're kind of like these small kind of tat or crocheted lace pieces that you find in old uh, homes in Amsterdam. I saw when I was there in the 70s. So I knew that they were kind of window treatment, and I just thought that was funny. That was part of the allure, is to domesticate these spaces. And now,
But they're
yeah,
hardly lace curtains. They're hardly lace curtains.
they aren't. But at the time, they were lacier than most. At the time, it's kind of hard to. They were somewhat decorative when you got up close, so
Hmm.
it's hard to convey to people now what it's was like to crochet something in public, because the crocheting hadn't hit yet. It was all knitting. Knitting was the thing. Knitting and needlepoint, kind of the high end the lovely northern climes, the kind of Anglo, the fishermen sweaters and nice ladies who, genteel people who learn how to stitch. And it's all coming out of the subversive stitch of those ideas from coming out of Britain in the 80s.
That's a great one.
So just take you through this to show you. After 9/11, a few things got horizontal. Suddenly I was making nets with holes in them, and
I hadn't thought of that.
And I didn't either until like a couple of months after, and I was like, oh. But also really playing like this gallery is probably 25 feet deep, and this is filling the space. So this idea, that I learned from Judy Pfaff about how do you make something in space that you can walk through, but then also collapse it into this dimensional, this flat drawing that you get to see something that's framed by in a sort of tableau as you walk through.
I'm glad you mentioned Judy Pfaff. I think she doesn't get enough attention for the influence that she had on a generation of artists. Yeah.
I was very happy to be able to put to it, like we took one artist out that wasn't as pertinent, I thought, to my practice, and put Judy in for the info panel at the park. I was like, I've never done it before because it felt like ass kissing. It's like, there's Judy right there. She's still alive. I don't want to be like, she's my mentor. But I'm like, for that very reason, she doesn't get nearly enough credit for training us to make these three-dimensional, these kind of abstract installations with referential objects that lose their identity at certain points in experiencing the space. And I've learned a tremendous amount from her. It lets one be a kind of, for her, she's a painter and a sculptor. I'm more of a draftsman, I think, and a sculptor, maybe recently a little bit.
Can you go back there for 1 second though, and just what's on the shelf there?
Okay, so these are the beginning of, these are one iteration of the votives, the tabletop objects, and they're at a period where everything is cat's plaster.
Okay.
And there are moves being made now. So this is all sprung into the space. And if you look carefully, you can see I can unscrew a lot of things, but this has got to be destroyed to take it away, because there's no way to get these rubber bands out of here except for cutting them. So it's really asking people to know something about process, and this seems to be, in my opinion, very much laid bare. If you don't know how to crochet, you can at least see it's lots of loops of things. You can see that these are rubber bands and shoelaces, and you can identify the parts, including the hardware. These are all D-rings. It's like D-rings are, a nail to people who install art. It's on the back of every painting, there's a D-ring. It's like this art connection to the wall, and then everything else is from somewhere else. And then making drawings that are cutting things apart and putting them together. And this is the first years that I'm back in the region. I'm back in New York. I'm really not only is it after 9/11, but I'm very much inhaling the city.
Now, at this point, you were able to salvage some of the work and as fragments that had another life, right?
Yes. So it becomes, I like to say, it's like a sourdough. It's so easy to go and put stuff in and then pull a line out, and you've erased, and add things to it. And, I ask everybody to cut stuff out of the space and send it back. And the cut parts are culled out and things are taken apart as much as necessary to keep it whole and not allow it to unravel. But yeah, I start
There's
seeing,
something organic about the process, right? Because then it's like making a cutting from a plant and growing another plant from the
yeah,
cutting.
you're very organic today.
I
It's
am.
true.
I'm feeling very outdoorsy today.
Yeah, it is like that. It's, uh, it is like that. I think it is organic. It's, I think how we grow. It's like um,
It's not like you're a pack rat. Like Nam June Paik was a pack rat. He just used things over and over again and
yeah,
never threw anything away. And if you can look at the old work and the new work and find pieces that he just used again and again, but
yeah,
you wouldn't necessarily know that about subsequent works of yours because the piece that it grew from grows into something that's completely different.
yeah. And if you like, I can, for a number of years, I noticed a few pieces that were like core, like, oh, that started in lap. That's a few years old. And it'd be like an old pal. And then would get taken apart for another piece and then it'd be lost. It's like, I don't know where that one went.
Mm.
Um, and then the drawings are the same, are simultaneously, they are a different kind of abstract resolution.
Can you
The
remind me the scale of those drawings again?
are, I don't know, maybe they're 20 inches wide and 14 inches high.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's proportionally makes any sense. Some are a little bit bigger. Um, that one's bigger. And a lot of this work went into the Fidelity collection. Right? Is that right? Fidelity?
Fidelity, I mean the investment company,
Yeah.
investment bank. Yeah, cool.
Um, so this is the first two woman show down in Palm Beach. Michael Rush put together. Michael Rush and Dominique Nahas will put this together too.
Hmm.
It's another era of collaboration. Now, of course, we've lost Michael, but
Yeah, he was a really interesting guy.
really interesting guy. So this is my first use of tow line. It just keeps, you see me use these materials again and again because I'm keeping them. It's like somebody buys them for me, so I'm going to use them. A lot of it has to do with the economy, keeping it incredibly economical, using the same, in my mind, same box of crayons. Like I'm going to use these crayons until they run out, and then I'll get a new box. But until, you know, so those are like 30-foot ceilings. That was the first. That's higher than what we worked on here. I think we were at 25 at the very top.
Hmm.
This is one of the Common Sense pieces. And Common Sense was started as a collaboration at another venue um, with our friend from the Everson,
With
Elizabeth, when she was
Dunbar. Uh-huh.
this, yeah. And then that was in Austin, and Valerie Cassell Oliver came and saw it, and then she put me in this group show, which was fantastic. And the idea was, I was starting to understand that I was being a bit of a control freak. I made it. I said it had to be destroyed at a particular way. I took everything back in a particular way, and so um, these pieces turned into. Let's see, I can make that go.
Hmm.
Basically, I would use much nicer quality yarn. This case, it was all fingerling because we invited Project Row House mothers to come.
Perfect.
And different and families came, and there were different events. This is the one that they made a video of. And it's just this idea that you give the work away. You give the materials away, not the work itself. So people can just pull on this and they come undone. My goal is to have it become completely empty, naked to the simple rope and shoelace, black rope and shoelace drawing underneath that had been made to be kind of weird, elegant. But they never got that far, except for in the Republic of Georgia, where the materials were so coveted that people were just like rolling stuff up and taking it home. It was like, yes, please use it all. So there was no, they were clear about the purpose and were happy to dismantle the art, which I appreciated completely.
So this was in
These
Tbilisi?
guys are doing a pretty good job. I love the way
Hmm.
they just they're just going along pulling stuff off. You can see this the pulling that's going on. It's pretty great. Anyway, here's the other two-person show Carrie and I did, and behind there is a very big Common Sense piece that never gets used because of COVID. And here's the collaborative space that Carrie and I make. I make the chairs, Carrie makes the tent. You can see the fabric and the plexi tent. And
Right.
just this desire for making, it's called Parlor for the People, this desire to make more places for people to hang out.
Where was it? Was that also in Houston?
So here we go back to the beginning. And so
Right.
these are what I make when I get tired of I get tired of crocheting. I love making these. I've made these since '94. I just adore making them. And one of the amazing things that has happened since the park is that at the symposium before the park opened, there was a discussion about it, basically how it's important to keep your mind open, one's mind open about what the norms are that we're kind of resisting. And I think that's my job as an artist, is to try to shed light on something that is either left out or is maybe wrongheaded or leaves people out of. We all want to insert our vision into the timeline, so to speak. And I think a lot of my interest is not only a feminist one and a conversation to dismantle patriarchy, but also a conversation to have the viewer and be in dialogue with people who are constantly checking in on their own epistemology, their own thinking, their own understanding of how they think and where their thinking comes from. I would say right now is a very important time. There's a tremendous amount of dogma being used in harmful ways, and investigating one's understanding of how you know what you know is important. So making small tabletop things isn't just an investigation of different kinds of sculpture, because there are so many that are so great, and there's no need to have a stylistic consistency, even if you are engaged in abstraction or bricolage, or all of these things are made in the same weird constructed way, whether they look that way or not. This is this has an armature underneath made in a way that would look totally like bricolage, except for I've covered it with fabric.
It's great.
This one you can see a little bit more clearly that they're things put together. And this is this is something that took me forever to figure out. And I had a million colors, and then suddenly I figured out it's called Dazzle Dome and it's for Carrie because she made so many glitter paintings. I was like, ah, I just need to put a glitter thing, match the glitter on the top and just make it white. And then because I had the whole thing painted this green underneath. I just left the green underneath there so there would be a little light leak. This is bronze and canvas, very traditional art materials.
Mm.
This is one of my favorite childhood art materials and something dumpster dived from outside of a furniture shop. This is an example of one of the tables installed at the traveling show Hot Mess Formalism. So, and this gives you an idea. In each venue, it was the curator's job to play with these in creating arrangements with all the types of things. And in each venue, they were radically different and extremely fun for me to see. Like I just so loved having the work played with by grown-ups. They look like toys to me.
Have a lot of these entered into public collections at this point?
There you go. And so this is the latest one, one of the latest ones. And this had to cook for a few years, but it's from parts collected over time. Some glass things that I made collaboratively at Haystack when I was a visiting artist up there, and some wood, some glass, some felt, some plastics, the hardware. I love the hardware. And this, they'll be at the show that opens tomorrow night at Marinaro Gallery downtown on Broadway. And then this is just another example of where I'm going. Not in type of work because it's video, but in the kind of reference to the Italian. I'm going to give you an animated version of this video that from a long time ago, but still means, this desire to make high art, to make, early Larry Poons or a grid painting or a dot painting or a Eva Hesse sculpture, but they're meatballs.
Fantastic.
So in this case, I'm also, the gain is everything is tweaked. So I also look like meat. So, it has very late 90s sense of the body and ethnicity and the kind of messiness. I love this. I love that shot of a really kind of gross remnants of meat on the green towel. So that's that.
That's
I'm going to
great.
go back questions, but I'm also going to go back here.
Well, of course, I just love the relationship.
And explain to you one of the things that I'll be doing. So I have a small residency of a sort that I'll be playing with some ideas, making some experiments up at a foundry upstate, and very excited. And I'm looking to, not this one, but I have some objects that I'm looking to 3D scan, which is going to be our first. I've never done anything like that. I've made prints. That's probably the only multiple I've made, but I see bronze is intrinsically a multiples material, and that even though early uses of bronze, there's a joke in my friend group that's don't let Sheila talk about too much history. She'll start just talking about the Bronze Age. And now I'm like just all into the things that I've learned over the years, first as a student casting bronze, then as a potential conservator, reading about bronze and all the historical processes and all that. The desire to go and work with all the workmen up there to do sort of bronze tricks and make bronze jokes in the material, just the way I think I make crocheting jokes in the material, and alter the traditional use. So that's a tall order.
Yeah.
But that's what's on my mind.
This was really remarkable because you really ran through a lot, and of course I love the idea that you're going to move kind of in a way sideways into the use of bronze, not necessarily forward or back, but I think it'll produce some really remarkable results. And one of the things I wanted to know was whether or not those tabletop objects that have found their way into public collections at this point, or are you still keeping them as a chess set to be played with?
It's actually, that's a thing that's in most public collections. So there are three that I sold to Harvard before I left town, and there are there's three at the Des Moines Art Center that was part of the Queer Abstraction Show, which includes the Dazzle Dome for Carrie and the other Oversewn piece, and some of them are especially queer looking. They got those. The De Cordova owns one as well as a big fiber piece, and I just sold, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, to Smith College Museum. They have the most of they have a great variety of my work there. And
has anyone been able to acquire an entire installation piece with instructions on how to reinstall it, or suggested instructions, and where they would play with it the way they wanted to in the future?
I think the one that's most like that is the piece called Put Me Down Gently, which was first installed at the ICA in Boston and then went to different venues, installed in radically different ways at each location, and has now gone, it's at the Everson. And so, right, it comes with no instructions, just connection points and the parts, and a great log of examples of how it's been installed so many times.
It's an enormous act of trust in art handlers and museum installers, who tend to be terrific artists wherever they are. It's a great job to get, right? But you're trusting in the future that there'll be those kind of art handlers who have an imagination to.
It's really, I think it's, and then there's another very big piece that Smith commissioned a while ago, and that comes with specific contact points. We just reinstalled it a year ago. That piece has some variety of installation. You can make some changes on the floor, but the piece that the Everson has is completely up to a curatorial interpretation.
Right.
And that's the thing I love. And I know at this moment in time, there's a curator who likes to play, a chief curator who makes things and likes to play with things, likes to interpret work so physically. And
but you're doing like an exquisite corpse piece in time, because you have no idea who's gonna be there to.
But I think that's right. I think that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. It's like a composer trusts conductors and an orchestra to do something that they may or may not like, or you may or may not like, but it's their work in it. And oddly enough, Ansel Adams saw his negatives that way. He always imagined that in the future people would print them in their own way that he might not have appreciated. So I like that. It's egoless in a way. You just put something out there, and then the world acts on it.
Yeah, it's going to anyway, and I would prefer to make it obvious. you
Yeah.
know, and I know, having worked in museums, that some curators will just leave it in storage. It's too much for them to think about or want to think about, and other curators will love it, and they'll think it's a great game, and um, have all. But
Yeah, and it's to some extent, having been at the Whitney all those years, I know, what a conservation honor and nightmare having Eva Hess, that great Eva Hess corner piece it was. And I imagine someday in the future, people will, conservators will be pulling their hair out saying, well, how do we use this without destroying it? And this is kind of weathering, and the rubber is now deteriorating, and or what have you.
Well,
Yeah.
None of the things that I've sold have they're a lot of synthetic like, I think about it.
Oh, okay.
I don't sell anything with rubber. I haven't sold anything with rubber. I know it's a problem, so I'm not really keen to.
Hmm.
If somebody wants to recreate a work from images, I'm a big Tatline fan.
Hmm.
Go for it.
Yeah, and also you had that experience of kind of playing with being a conservator at some point. So
Yeah.
you think the way a conservator would think,
Yeah.
which is not true for most artists. Anyhow, we will continue our conversation on our other Zoom site. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed Sheila's presentation as much as I have. And join us again next week for another fantastic talk. But right now we're going to go to back to our classroom Zoom for our conversation with the graduate students in this program. So see you on the other side, Sheila, and those of you who are join us next week at the same time. Bye bye.